collaboration and collective work as their practice, so that they have, a sort of unique architectural language that is all their own, which combines tradition and modern sort of responses. So I'm not going to talk too much about that because I think you'll see it in her work. Again, as an academic reminder, students, please remember that there is a report at the end of this that you have to put up. Okay, Vami, thank you for joining us today. We can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can. Project Perspectives.
Yes, perfect. So hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning to the class, to the students, Shilpa and other professors. I hope everyone is doing well. Everyone is in good physical as well as mental health. I believe that's equally important right now in this current scenario. And I know what a unique way for us to meet. Like nobody had ever predicted this.
Absolutely. Yes.
And what a unique way for the students to start this journey, right? Like, but the thing is, if we kind of for a minute not look at the negatives, then I truly think that the most innovative and interesting solutions come out of the most strangest of circumstances, So I hope like all you kids are starting this journey, starting this semester with a positive attitude and are really kind of eager to now take up this unique challenge, which is not just the first time for you, but it's a first time for the professors, for the practice, for the industry all together. So I hope, everything goes well and wish you all the best for this semester. So with this note, I think I'll just quickly start describing what my today's lecture is going to be like. Just a second. Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm doing is basically I'm going to briefly touch upon each project, but I'm going to in detail try and explain the approach to the project. Okay, the process and the methods that we've used to arrive at a certain solution, and the focus being on the process, not really on the solution of the project. Given in India, each project, the typology, the program, the design, the building techniques, the materials, the geographical context, everything becomes so subservient to the immediacy of each project and becomes each project unique frame of reference. With India, vast kind of socio-cultural, socio-economic, and environmental factors, our approach also starts varying depending on what the context is like. And our response our action really becomes a response to the varying context that we come across. What I'll do is, these are some of the parameters what you see on the screen right now that we kind of indulge in when we start that process. Say redefining typology, like if you're working whether on a residential component or a mall component or what is it, how can it go beyond that? The idea of adaptive and collaborative, even that is actually something very, very interesting that we've discovered through this journey, mainly because, now no longer we go in the project as sole author of the project. The architect has also really changed from what it was back as the master build when Brunelleschi did his door to what we are today, where there are so many other factors that influence the project. And then there is a certain lightness in being adaptive, in letting all those factors influence the project. Also kind of building parameter by which you judge the architecture, where architecture is not just a built form, but really it starts getting measured on things like a livability index, something that is not so tangible. Because at the end of the day, architecture is something that you inhabit. Of course, you enjoy it visually, but at the end of the day, it is something that you inhabit. You experience it through all your senses. the city as a project is also something very interesting. It ties back to what I was saying, where your varying text that you have, that really starts becoming your project. The latent resources within your context start becoming factors that influence the project itself. The new regional, even that is something interesting. Again, especially when you're working in peri-urban, like slightly outside the urban nodes, so say, and one would assume, that's my local material or that's my local technique, and, we adapting that. And then you question that in today's day and age, with the kind of knowledge networks that exist, really what is defined as regional or local, and hence we call it the new regional. So, and what we'll hopefully notice in this presentation is that the approach to any project is not one out of these five, but really like a cross-pollination of all of these, or maybe even more various processes and approaches that we try and kind of work with. So with this, I'll just kind of start explaining each project. The first one that I have chosen is quite an old one, but an interesting one. It was a mall which in Ahmedabad on this blue line that you see over here on the screen is the SG highway. So it was just off that. It was a corner plot, okay? And it was a young developer, and based on whatever market study he had done, he wanted to build a mall here. But he also wanted some amount of flexibility that, what if I don't get that many retail customers, want to convert it to F&B, to an office spaces. So you listing down parameters that start becoming critical for us to start defining the diagram of the project. So there is, when it's retail, you're talking about real engagement. When it's a kind of flexibility in the program, you're talking about adaptiveness or flexibility, easy accessibility. So what happened is we started off a basic kind of volume study. As you can see, this is and because it's like a developer product, there are numbers that come to matter, there's FSI and all of that. So this is just a basic extrusion of, this is how much we're supposed to build. Now, if I were to build a mall over here, this is the kind of frontage that I get because it's on the ground floor, unless it is something really interesting, unless it's something really visually engaging. How do you draw the public in? How do you increase the foot? Because honestly, that is one of the very key parameters for this architectural program to run. So what followed was a series of chronological diagram we started developing, that how do we let people in and into the project and start moving within the project. And this is what it finally resulted into. As you can see, what happens is, what we had was that X frontage. By this operation, we have immediately multiplied that 3 times over. So something that was only limited to the ground level, what we've managed to do is extend the ground plane up, make the movement, observe the movement of the people, get them into the project, and hence by doing, increase the amount of frontage that you. And this is what and yes, then we add this kind of circulation to for people movement, extend the ground plane higher up, and this is what eventually it started looking like. And I mean, it's a visualization, but so another thing that it does is to allows for that flexibility aspect that I was explaining. So today it's a retail shop, but because of the way it is situated, it could develop as an F&B space, as an office space, or something like that. Some more visuals. And with that, I'll go to the next project. Now, this one is actually interesting. I mean, I have a lot of small story attached to this project, and if I would love talk about it like story, literally like a narrative. So this project actually started where we went to the site and ended up meeting this monk over there. Sorry. I just moved back. Yeah, I ended up meeting the Buddhist monk out there. We did an early morning kind of yoga session with him. And what followed was, after the yoga session, a series of conversations led to a discussion on how we require to build a community. Actually, so sorry, I should mention that we were over there for another project and we accidentally met this Buddhist monk. We did a session. Then what followed was series conversations with him, which that we need to develop a community center over for the people who are living close. You know, also like a physical wellness, vocational training, spiritual guidance, that of a basic non-profit center for learning and skill development. And to most you know that meditation is like an act of observing oneself, observing our emotions, and being aware of the reactions that we have to those observations. That was something that I'm very conscious of in design process in this project. Okay, like meditating, we tried to absorb as much as possible from the context, from the idiocy of the project, of a lot came from just observing all of that. So I'll just explain the site context here. What you see, the vertical gray line was one of the main roads, and an alternate gray line next to it was the railway. The red rectangle is where the site is. As you can see, it was full of trees. And the green circle that you see next to the red rectangle was a molasses tank, actually. And further down south from the site is a huge sugar plant further down south, which you can't see this picture, but immediately over. Site itself was pretty regular, except it was filled with trees, almost like, I think, about 60 trees, mix of neem and gulmohar. The site at its first glance almost looked unbuildable, to be honest, like with way too many trees all over the place. So, in fact, what we did is that green tank that we climbed over that, and just to give you an idea, this is what the site looked like. This was the kind of immense foliage that looked like. And here the challenge, and actually not just the challenge, the beauty of the project for us was to build a center of spiritual guidance with its root, and literally its root in the nature. So it was, I think, a beautiful challenge. We obviously took that up. What followed was a lot of site visits, a lot of sketches and doodles. What you see over here is obviously a site survey with some trees and a lot of doodles and a lot of iterations on defining what the remainder area is like, really trying to see where we can wedge the program in between the trees, as you can see over here. And just trying to kind of insert these blocks in whatever oak faces that we get. What eventually resulted was a plan like this, which had programs stored around a courtyard with a lot of existing trees, another court with a lot of existing trees over here. I don't know if y'all can see my cursor, actually. And all these programs kind of tied together with a common plinth. Something like this, something like this. Now comes the question of how do we articulate this? Yes, it was step one, get a plan in place. But when we started drawing sections like this, some felt amiss. And you're meditating, you're in there, you're trying to connect with your inner self. You need to be associated with such a beautiful site in some way. Can't be locked inside four walls and not know what's going on outside. Something felt amiss. Something felt that was not right. That the beautiful tree foliage, the light filtering through those trees, that was something that one should experience. And we definitely wanted to accentuate that natural setting and not, in fact, close it down or box people up. So hence a simple operation of inverting the roof, what it did was we felt that there was an immediate connection with the outside. You could immediately see the foliage of the trees from that opening that you get. Also, opening at a higher level allowed for us to naturally ventilate this space with the hot air kind of escaping from the top and fresh air coming in from the bottom. The light that you would get, the sunlight filtering through the trees, was absolutely beautiful, which you could experience while sitting within a sheltered space. It almost felt like, one of those scenes where you're sitting under a tree and listening to a guru. And it really mimicked that kind of natural setting. And yeah, and another thing was, with the major openings being higher than your eye level, while you're meditating, if there's any movement in the courtyard outside over here, it doesn't tend to disturb you. You are at while you're still connected to the outside, you're also isolated, and you still have a chance to stay within that inner peace and inner kind of thoughts. I spoke about collaboration earlier. So here, I want to talk about how we collaborated with this person called Hunar Shah. I mean, it's a company called Hunar Shah. They're based out of Gujarat, and they really have some good craftsmen who are expert in a lot of these little techniques, or even if they're not, have a lot of knowledge base to develop over it. So what followed was, a lot of site visits with the Hunarshala team, and with Kiran Bhai, who you see in this image over here, a lot of research. And I'll be very honest here, to be, how you kind of romanticize this kind of rammed earth walls, So we started it was a very agricultural rich area. So we believed that it was soil, and we should be able to do a good rammed earth wall. And we would keep driving around with the Hunar Shah team to the nearby kind of areas, looking for the right kind of soil with enough clay content, so it can kind of bind, stay in that. That's what we were looking for. And every we would be driving around, and we would be like, Karan Bhai would immediately like, wait, stop that, and let me go down, just go walk a little meters, pick up the oil, and taste it. Like, yeah, you heard me right. He would taste it, and we were wondering what is doing and why is he doing this. He's like, no, I'm just trying to see the salt content in the oil, because otherwise it results in that discoloration over time. So if it has a high salt content, let's not even send it to the lab for any kind of thing. It's rejected right there. And these are just some smaller instances and nuances of how there is so much knowledge base and that knowledge network I was talking about, and how the project can really enrich from, should you allow it to influence the project. So what ended up on the right side is the gray block. That is what we finally ended up using. I spoke about a sugar factory right south of the site. So what happened is there was a lot of fly ash that was being generated as a waste product from the sugar factory. And we ended up using fly ash and a combination of stone dust from a nearby quarry, and that with a little bit of cement as binding agent, and those became our building blocks. So, we from wishing to build rammed walls to rammed stone dust and fly ash walls. So what you see in the image over here is we ended up using fly as formwork for this, and hence you see the 4 feet module over here. And the horizontal lines, that texture is what comes up because the process of the actual ramming of the wall, which you can see over here. So, actually visits to this project ended up more like shops than site. It was, we would all go, and we would also try our hand, building it. So we've all kind of given a little out of us to this project in that way. And here, this is what it kind of looked like eventually when the kind of walls started being up. Now was the challenge to kind of build that roof I explained earlier. So what we did is, I'm not sure how many of you all have been to Alang, but if you haven't, I really recommend being there. The scale is unfathomable. Like, it's really interesting to look at that scale of shipmaking happening. And the reason why we went there is to get really good quality zinc wood. And one good quality in this that kind of length of members also without knots and undulation can be the entire log be used in its entirety. So this is all the that comes out of the breaking of the ship, so it has been in the water for years and years, it is seasoned well, and hence it is okay to use it in these kind of environmental conditions, in these external environmental conditions. So what followed was a lots of series of mock-ups to get the right height and get the right angle, get the right joinery detail, as you can see over here. And eventually, this is what the framework kind of for the roof started coming together like. Now, another interesting was, now when we are building like this is of course an area that also gets equally hot. Sorry, did I mention it is in parts of Maharashtra close to Shirdi? That's where the sugarcane kind of grows and the sugar factories are. So it does get really hot, and insulation was something that we definitely needed to address. And actually with the kind of structure that we have, where we are not paying for your, like your RCC slab, anything like that. So in one of our kind of trips in the nearby villages and stuff, we noticed a lot of these things that were attached to the roof. I'll explain what they were. So basically what you see over here are these jute bags, like gunny bags, So what these women do is they cut them up, they hold them with mud, water, and dried hay, and they keep rolling it like this over a stick. I think about 3 times over. It dries up and then you roll another layer, it dries up and you roll another layer. And you start laying them like that. This becomes a beautiful insulation material, something that they have been using years together over there in those houses. We ended up using that under our roof as the main insulation layer. And it works brilliantly today, and it really cools the space within this. The heat gain is really reduced. So these are the wooden rafters. You saw the kind of insulation that happens with the wooden rafters. Now these rafters are supported on a central concrete kind of or a gutter over here that takes care of also your water drainage. So because your roof is inverted and your kind of low point is here, this is what it supports on. I just want to talk about brickwork for a bit. Beautiful bricks available. Think about 50 to 75 kilometers away from the site. Used a simple way to kind of use spacers and use that as a pointing technique so that the pointing is consistent through the project. And there you can see all the workers super happy around about these techniques that they are taught every day and which their mentorship can get better. So you have, and yes, a final layer on the roof was a Mangalore tile. These are reused Mangalore tiles from a nearby project that was being demolished. Flooring was cow dung, again, a very age-old technique, very hygienic, can be done over and over again, keeps the floor really cool. And that really is like a structural kind of diagram of the project with the wooden rafters, the Mangalore tile, the concrete gutters sitting on the brick walls, the 2 ends, the C-shaped walls that you see over there. And these are then some images of the final project. So here, I just want to point out one thing, you guys saw many kind of initial surveys, doodles that we did to try and fit within the trees, okay? In spite of that, every time we line out on site, there would be some or the other issue. And I just want to point out that how a lot of times there was so much improvisation on site, like things like this that you see over here, that somehow the survey wouldn't just get it right, or some branches wouldn't come get documented in the survey. So some kind of modifications, like you can see the plinth turning around the tree to allow for that tree to happen. Those are things that kind of get improvised on site. I mean, it's almost like a feedback loop between you and the work that is going on and back and forth. This is just a night shot. This is from that central courtyard where you can see all the tree and the foliage. And this kind of diagram puts the project back in its context, certainly how it sits in the ecology of the context, with the stone dust walls, the seasoned wood, the upcycled clay tiles, the mud plaster floor. The project was actually very, in fact, serendipitous, from that rare combination of that first-hand experience of that meditation session to a very complex and a natural site and a personal satisfaction of building something, building a responsive structure through an earthen technique. So I think I would say that the essence of this project was achieve that kind of calm and serenity through the design. And that is something that is what we were constantly kind of going back to through the design process and through our entire discovery of the process. These are some images of the project eventually being used. And yeah. So this is actually a competition that we won. It was for the National War Museum in Delhi, near Delhi Gate. And this at that time, this was one of the biggest projects actually that the studio won, one of the biggest competitions that we won, one of the first times for us. And what was intimidating was that we may be long gone, but this structure was there to stay. It was going to be there for generations to come. It will stand for India, for who India was, is, and will be tomorrow. It had the image of the project became extremely important. And also to build in a context that is so rich in its history and its socio-cultural kind of significance was an interesting challenge, I thought. So this is where you see number three, that is where the site was. Number one is where the India Gate, and the number two is where the Chhatri, so that should orient you. This is near the Delhi kind of Lutyens area. That's the kind of axis that you have between I mean, that when you see drive towards the India Gate, that's the blue line over there. So the program was to build a National War Museum. It's for all the three kind of defense departments, your Army, your Navy, and your Air Force. And it documents, I mean, it doesn't have a war museum. So it was one of the first of its kind in the country. And like I said, it would have, given its text and the nation where it was situated, it would be the image of the product really intent. And so what we started doing is what you see here in red is a pretty much built program, which are your main galleries. So where you have your people kind of in, you have your ticketing and all of that, and you have people strolling through this entire museum gallery and coming out again. So what we did was we kind of lifted the main galleries higher up and keeping only your ground level very, very sparsely located, with only the public level programs like your toilets or your baggage, your ticketing, and other such things, audio visual guides and other things. What this does is it allows people to navigate through the project, and allows people to move through the building, really trying to keep that existing fabric of the way people use that space over there right now near the Delhi gate, near the India gate, trying to keep that fabric alive, trying to keep the nature of that space alive, letting people still experience that garden extends through and through. And this is not going to be a structure that will come and pose over it and then away that fabric that existed over there for so many years. Again, lots of beautiful trees on site. We love that. Of course, no complaints about that. So what we started doing is we started carving out the program around the kind of tree foliage and like to see what kind of remains. So this is what we eventually kind of get, where we scoop out all the areas that we need for the trees. They start really becoming our pause points in our flow of people when they move through the gallery. So the organization of the gallery was in a way where the 3 departments were divided into horizontal layers. You have the Air Force in the topmost, you have the Army in the mid-level, and the Navy below that. And as you move in a linear way through the building, through the length of the building, you move across the timeline. You're starting from your independence to till present. So, and talking about the Indo-China War, the Indo-Pak War, and all that, in a linear way, like that. So yeah, if I were to simplify it, this is what it kind of looked like. Your 3 departments, and then you move left to right to across the timeline of the entire history. Now, so this combined with the form that we have after the tree scooping results in something like this. So now we have this, which was our initial massing study, and then we have this, which was our program organization, both combined together, resulting in a project like this, where this is what you see on the main axis. This is how the kind of building sits within that fabric, within that landscape. These are all those public spaces at the lower level, and a lot of open gallery documentation happens at that level, where people can just walk through, move past by, read it, and move past. This is how you experience the inner galleries, where let's say I am on the Army level. I can look down onto what was happening in the Navy at the same time in that particular year, and what was happening in the Air Force at the same time on that particular year. So you do that kind of vertical connection as well. Like I can see what's happening at the lower level and at the upper level. And of course, you have the timeline that you show. With that, I end that project. And so I spoke about a couple of projects which have a diagram-based approach and a program organization-based approach, or I spoke about a project that illustrated how we were trying to redefine typologies. I spoke about a project that was enriched in its context, from its context rather. This one is actually a very interesting approach, and so this was in Hyderabad. Hyderabad is very, very Vastu compliant for the certain things, like the side of the entry and the direction in which the master bedroom is, and the direction in which the toilets are. Sometimes to the extent that it can result in something really impractical as well. I mean, that's just... this was a large township that we were doing, about 100 odd houses. And it was this program. I mean, you have your private, your semi-private spaces, and then your public spaces like your living room, your dining room, and maybe a little bit of terraces. And each one pretty similar from the other, but still slightly modified. And the main reason for modification, depending on which side are you entering the plot from, the Vastu will change it. So because of that, you can't have the living room on this side and hence it moves on the other side. So there were parameters of which side you're entering the plot from, and that really depends on how your road network is. So which side were you entering from, which side were you facing when you enter, and then hence similarly other programs, So your living room, you want the living room to be on the side where you enter, but it also cannot be because of the vastu. So it's almost like a mathematical problem which had to be resolved with this kind of geometry of all these different programs. So what we ended up doing is almost developing like a kit of parts that here, these are my 6 modules, and we start working with them. And these are the things that, these are the 6 modules that just keep coming together in different ways, addressing all those parameters that are listed, almost an algorithm, but in a physical form, where, oh, if you're entering from the north side, this is the module that will turn, and this is what will happen. If you're entering from this side, this is what will happen. So it was like this, almost like a Lego block. We made our own little Lego block. We came up with our own little kind of pieces, and there's a certain way it interlocks, and it always kind of results in a new configuration depending on the parameters that you feed it in. I mean, honestly, this is what we call parametric design. Really interesting. These are your parameters, and this is what your end result will. And we got various configurations out of it, and it made the entire design process so much simpler to execute over there on site also. And even for us, kind of put together that entire. Otherwise, we would end up making drawings for each and every like 100 set of WDs for 100 villas, which would have just been crazy and not really efficient. These are some images of under construction. But here, I want to focus on that kind of kit of parts, not so much on what the end product is, like I said earlier, but really the process was so unique and so interesting and so tailored to address this particular on site. And with that, I'll move to the last project, guys. This one is the Sharda Library. I believe it's also in program similar to what you guys will be addressing in this semester. So this Sharda school is actually one of the few English mediums in this area. This is again closer to Shirdi, I would say. I mean, not really. It's still an hour away from me, but it's interior parts of Maharashtra. And it's run under the Somaya College group. It's run under that umbrella. It's aided by them. And what happened is that there was a conversation between Mr. Sameer Somaya, the founder, and his daughter, and we're talking about, how kids actually need books to learn from. And that's when he realized that, we need to build a library existing school. So school already existed for kids from first to 10th standard, but it didn't really have a dedicated space library. And that's when the idea of this project kind of came up. And in one of our client briefings, when he called us and when he was explaining his vision to us, he spoke about a conversation that he had with one of his other students, where he remembered that the student telling him that, even after that many years, I come to the college campus, I still look at that bench which I used to sit on for hours every day, that bench sitting under it, and I used to take a book and sit over there and read. And when he was telling us incident, it kind of struck us that, architecture, we don't realize subconsciously becomes a strong part of our memory, and especially childhood memory. And when we started thinking a bit more, we had these discussions in the studio also, and I was telling Sameep as well that I used to be honest, I was very intimidated by my library, by the library in my school. It had such high ceilings. It was one of those convent schools with high ceilings in the library and really tall bookshelves, which I could actually honestly never read. There were so many rules to abide by, and it just never felt as comfortable. It was just easier to either pick up a book and go somewhere else, or take it in your comfortable place in your comfort zone and read it. Or worst, and I know sometimes it happens that no, let me go there at all. So we realized that the form of the library had to become a structure which would attract the kids, which kids would love to come to. That it can't be a place with too many rigid constructs. That perception had to be kind of broken, or had to be changed, and that becomes a means for us to start looking library in its basic form. That what is its actual utility, and can architecture really become a part of the memory that a child would associate with? That it can become part of the memory of that child's development. Could we build a building that would embed itself in the memories of the kids positively, and not in a way that it will intimidate the kid? So, in one of those brainstorming sessions, a simple hypothesis that we felt that kids are way more comfortable with landscape. Like they engage with landscape much early on, before they start associating with architecture, with any of built form. Like how many times have you seen that you have like a mound of rubble on the street, and the kid will always go over it, and the mother will be like, oh, wait, let me hold your hand, you will fall down. Like the mother will move from the side. So kids have that engagement with landscape and with with landscape much early on than they have with any kind of built architecture form. So that was the question, that can this building be anything more than just four walls and a roof? Can it be something more? And with that kind of research, and we were constantly looking at, what can we do, and what do we want to build with? Maybe we will get some clue if we chose our building material, or maybe we'll get some clue with something else. So again, we found really good quality bricks over here, and with a very high compressive strength also. When I say quality, I don't just mean the aesthetic of the brick, but the compressive strength with which that when you do those lab tests, the compressive strength of these bricks was really, really high as compared to the conventional ones that we are used to seeing or using for construction over here. And now that we had some kind of at least a start point, that how can we use this brick to its utmost efficiency, not just use it as a decorative element or as a cladding element. Really, can it do something more? Can it really become the structural member of the entire project? While doing this research, we came across this kind of software called Rhino Gold. And what did is, yes, we kind of played around with the software. We worked with, what you're seeing on the screen are some of force diagram and horizontal kind of equilibrium, vertical equilibrium, all of that. And yes, I said, okay, no harm. Let us really learn the software. Worst case, maybe it won't help us here, it will help us somewhere else. Learned it, and we managed to kind of get a form, something like this. And we were quite happy, and great, now we have a form, and now let's start building. And honestly, we thought the worst was over. Like, this was the difficult part, looking for all of this, doing that research on the material, on the compressive strength, and all of that, and learning a new software, coming up with a form using that, only to realize that honestly the worst was not behind us, it was ahead of us. And the building something like this was an equally challenging task, to be honest. So I'm going to move back one step and tell you where exactly the library was sitting in. There was an existing structure over here that you see, number 3 and number 4. And this kind of squiggly form that you see, that is where the kind of library sits. The reason why we situate the library, and the number 2 is the entire school building. And over here down south, where you see number 6 is where the grounds of the school are. So the reason we purposely situated a library over here is it really becomes a part of the daily commute of these kids, they start passing through it pretty much every day, multiple times a day. And with that form, we were quite excited, I mean, if not at least under the library, the kids will go over the library, but at least they will engage with it in some way or the other. But like I mentioned, the building this was an equally difficult task, to be honest, or even more so. And that led us to do a lot more research. So this is, I say, really the diagram of the project, where in doing the research, you see over here on the top with the blue lines are the first diagrams that are generated by that software that I spoke about called Volt, which comes actually from ETH Zurich in Switzerland. And started doing our research, and we realized that a lot of Catalan vaults that are built in Spain have similar technique. They are built in the same principle. So we did a lot of research, saw Gustavino's vaults where, there were layering of bricks. We understood how your joints between bricks should not overlap. They are always laid in different directions in each course. Did furthermore research and found this structural engineer called Eladio Diaz from Uruguay. Again, extended this technique of the 16th century Catalan vaulting in Spain, and used the same technique, but did huge, long, major cantilevers with it and really thin vaults. And we're like, how is he doing this? And how is it possible that he's able to do this with such thin vaults, which are made of brick tiles? And we realized that he had come up with this idea of using compression rings. So basically, they stock the vault and they allow for the vault to not buckle out, and it keeps the vault in shape. And then there were bricks that we found, like I told you all, near our site. So really, this is the project diagram for us. This is how it came together with a software from Switzerland, with kind of vaulting system of the 16th century Spain, with structural system from an engineer in Uruguay, with materials from India. And this is what I was thinking about, your knowledge networks are so kind of well connected that really, how do you define the new regional or the regional in a context like this? So we move on, we start with smaller mockups. Like you see here are just some kind of smaller version mockups. We start looking at it, from a lot of aspects, like, how will the bricklaying work and what will be the form work for the bricklaying, and I know all of that. We were successful. We had some kind of brick vaults that we made. We tested them with weight, with all of us standing over it, to a point where it would crash, because we needed to understand that. We needed to understand how this would work. So then once we had that done, we started developing of more details, of how will the vault meet the ground. There are really 5 points where it really touches the ground. So how will the load transfer happen at that point? How is the footing design going to be? How do we visually continue the brick landscape further into the ground and make part of the ground landscape as well? How do we layer the 3 layers of bricks, and what happens between them? How do we take care of waterproofing, and how do we introduce a textile member? Do we introduce nano coating? Lots of mock-ups out of reach for all of that. Then came a bigger task. How do you actually execute this project on site? Like, in the sense that, you are used to giving or setting a drawing which has an X and a Y. Like, it has 2 coordinates. You point that on the ground and then you put it. That's how they make films, and that's how they make labs on site. But here, the entire stability of the form came from structural accuracy. It had to be absolutely accurate, because it is the form that generated out of the software that gave that structural stability. So any kind of tweak in that will result to unwanted stresses in structure and can lead to cracks and maybe even collapse. So what we did is we ended up plotting every point and giving it a X, Y, and a Z axis. So what you see over here are bamboos that are cut up to that height, the Z, and you plot it over there as X, Y, and the Z grid L. And with that, we get the entire form of a kind of volt, like you see over here. The second biggest task was, what is my formwork? Yes, I will start laying the bricks, but what do I lay the bricks on? Like, yes, I can use ply, like how people will do, you know, when we are making formwork concrete, you make ply shuttering. But that would have been a criminal waste. I mean, a lot of raw material would have been wasted, and that's not a sustainable solution by any means, because once I cut that ply into this kind of awkward shape, it's of no use. Once I'm done with laying bricks, I just have to de-shutter it and then throw it. So what we came up with was using, yeah, it's a small little video, but just kind of shows you the entire formwork done with rebars. These are rebars used on a lot of sites. What happens is, once the bricklaying process is done, it was as simple as peeling off the bar from the bottom, you know, like de-peeling it, and that's it. And it's perfectly fine to use it on another site. And that way, it was a much more economical and a much more sustainable solution that we came up with. Then comes the kind of claying that we started. As you can see over here, the first one goes in one direction, and then the next course goes in the other, and the third one goes in the other direction. It's X, Y, and like a diagonal. So what you see are some more images of the bricklaying process. This is what eventually, when we finished all the 3 layers of brick, this is what it kind of looked like. That is, all the formwork is still in place. We haven't de-shuttered it yet. And over here, what you see are de-shuttering in place. And you can see that kind of rebar skin is being peeled off slowly. It's been peeled off already over here. Some critical points still kind of held up until we have de-shuttered the whole thing together. And this is what eventually, when the entire vault was shuttered, this is what it looked like. You can see 3 out of those 5 points, vault touches the ground in this picture. This is how it kind of needs sound. Our flooring is already done by this point. You can see, like, it was very, the slopes on some ends were really easy to climb, and that was really interesting to see how people kind of engage that. But I'll speak about that in a bit. So next comes the task of, you know, all your library. It still needs all your furniture. It needs all your kind of stacks. So so this is the floor plan. One thing that we realized on site when we saw those images, the entire vault was seen, it was quite a long space, you know. And we realized, again, the same thing, you know, we need to bring down the scale to something that a kid would associate with. So we broke down scale using furniture, actually, and we laid the library stacks in a way where they start making these little kind of niches or kind of areas demarcated visually, which allows the kid to feel like it's his own little private space, and allows for multiple classrooms also to coexist if should there ever be a need. So by this kind of a layout where it breaks the linearity of the space, and that's what we see over here in the images. It's these little kind of circles are created with the furniture. Another thing was, now this was a vault that is stable in its entire compression state, okay? If there are any tensile forces that get generated in it, it will result to cracks. So you can't have any of our services coming in from the ceiling, like all your fans, your lights, everything that we are used to, you know, doing your wiring from the ceiling. We can't do that. So what we ended up doing was taking a lot of these from the floor and through our furniture like this, like you can see the black rod coming out of these rods over, coming out of these stacks over here. that is, so these were not only just to keep the books, but they were really like infrastructure kind of stacks to also allow for all this movement of wires and all of that, and support the kind of infrastructure that's required. Some more images of that. This one that you see, you can see old kind of in the ground over here. To be honest, this is not part of our initial design at all. We were initially blocking this off, like only until you have head height, we would have it, and after 7 feet, we were going to block it off. And that's where actually our library books were going to be stacked. But in one of the earlier pictures, we saw the vault being de-shuttered. That's when we went at site and we realized that, you know, that point where the vault meets the ground is actually beautiful. Yes, it defies all your ergonomics that, you know, it doesn't have enough feet for somebody to stand there, but it is such a cozy corner, such a cozy nook. Those are the kind of space that you want in a library. So what we ended up doing is designing this really small furniture for smaller kids. And that really becomes like small zone, like at all those 5 points, these really become zone for those really small kids and something that they can associate with. So we end up scrapping that idea of, you know, doing those walls over there. We expressed where the vault meets the ground, let it express, let people experience that height, let people experience that gradually increasing lower, higher. So that resulted in that kind of little seating furniture you see over there. This is just section through the project just to again show how the vault meets the ground. And then another task of now, obviously we have to enclose it. It's not a pavilion. We still need to make it a habitable space and protect it from all your weather elements. So how do you do windows again over here? Because we can't pin anything over here in the vault, like I explained earlier. The minute I pin anything in the ceiling, it will create tensile forces. It can result into cracks. Now, a window is normally spanning between your floor and your ceiling. So, and it needs support from either. How do you do it? Now, you take a piece of paper and you try and keep it straight, like keep it vertical, and it won't stand. Now, you fold it like a fan and then open it slightly and then make it'll stand. What is it? It's just structural form finding. It's that particular shape that it's finding its stability in its form. So what we ended up doing is designing the windows like that in that corrugated form that you see on the image right now over here, because they are not pinned to the vault at all. There is a slight expansion joint gap over there with a rubber filled with a rubber gasket, and this is only thing at the bottom and on the sides. It's not allowed to touch the vault at the top. Otherwise, again, like I said, it will generate tensile forces. So that is the reason for why the windows are based like that. And what you see, the horizontal member over there, that the glass doors are below that, and above that is all mesh. So again, that allows for natural ventilation. As you can see, that it's not an air-conditioned space. The brick vault itself keeps the space really cool. The stone floor also helps in keeping the floor cool. And this kind of mesh at the upper level allows for all the kind of hot air to escape. So keeps the space relatively much cooler than what it is outside, at least 5 to 7 degrees, I would say, even on a hot summer day when we were beside. And you all see is now just more picture of the project. You will see some kids kind of engaging with it. You will see, again, the kind of library stacks, which also are our infrastructure first. These are huge sands. I think this is about 40 to 50 feet, if I'm not mistaken, this vault. This particular span between these two points was coming down. So what I really think is symbolic of this project is that we are not just looking at history and the origins of this technology as just an inspiration. Okay, we are not trying to replicate that old method, but we are trying to replicate that old method with a modern approach. You know, you're able to take that idea, take the technology, the older technology, and push that idea further. So our learnings from our lessons of history and adapting it with today's technology and leveraging the access that access to knowledge networks that sit in today. So when we combine the two things, it's not just a project that learns from geographies like I explained earlier, like Switzerland, Uruguay, or India, but also through various times of history, because it's an age-old technology. We are being able to combine that with the technology that is available today, and then it really is not a replication of what we were doing hundreds of years ago, but more like an inspiration, more like an evolution of what we were doing, hundreds of years ago. And now next is just a small video. Sorry for the volume, but it's somebody, a friend of mine was there, and he ended up sending to me because just to show how the kids are really engaging with the product. And this was beautiful. This was really kind of overwhelming. And somewhere what we were trying to kind of achieve, and we are really grateful to have that opportunity to do a project like that. And yeah, I think with this, I conclude my talk. I just want to again re-emphasize on cross-pollination of various processes, various approaches, critical thinking, contextual responses. And yeah, I think these are some of the parameters that we try to keep in mind whenever we are approaching object. I hope this was helpful, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vami. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Shilpa.
Yeah.
I can.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you so much, Vami, again for a wonderful talk. And I am wondering, there were very frankly many terms that the students would not have understood, but it's good for them to get it from you and through you. I'm really glad about the parts where you emphasize that design just doesn't come from the top of your head. There are a lot of things that contribute towards it. Beauty and aesthetics is not just looks. It comes from the material. It comes from understanding what your user wants. The fact that you can't also just solve your design with software. You have to have that big idea first. Software eventually becomes a tool for you to, sort of implement it. Of course, the fact that history becomes so important as a contribution to your form at any time. In fact, yeah, we do try to say all the time that when we are learning humanities or history, there are actually case studies that we are learning so that we can, implement them into our design at some point. The idea that okay, WD kids, the students, WD, the full form of it was, which Vami did speak of a couple of times, means working drawings. So after you design your project, you have to tell the contractor in very simple language, Vami, for them. You have to tell your contractor how actually to execute it so that your design is built the way you intended. So it's actually the working drawings are very much part of your design. So to say that I will, do my working drawing or construction details after my design is done is a huge fallacy. And very obviously, you're just going to turn into, a poster designer otherwise. Students, any questions? There would be a lot of things that you would not have understood. That's all right too. They haven't started their first design per se. They of course did a small one in the first semester, but students, with whatever you have understood, are there any questions, comments for architect Vami here? Melissa?
Yes, Miss, I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Miss, the question is like, we know what is the space required, like what utilization is there, and we know what is the site, but how do you break down it into a plan at a simpler level?
So, hi, Melissa. I completely kind of get your question because I know the dilemma early on through this journey is always about what is supposed to be my next step. And if there is one advice that I give you, Melissa, I would say don't be afraid. You don't be afraid to try things out. Okay. Yes, you will sketches. Yes, you will try physical models. You will try something on the computer. Put it out there. You are not committing to it by putting it out there. It is a process. The first thing that you draw is never really the last thing that you will make. It is going to evolve in that journey. And like I said, allow for all those external factors to let it influence you, and allow for that sketch to evolve, allow for that thought to evolve. And don't worry, don't be fearful, don't be naive. Put it out there, and 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 just move along with it, I would say, Melissa. I mean, I don't know if that really solves your problem, but I'm just saying this from my personal experience because I know where you're coming from. Not long ago, I was there, and I know that kind of fear in the first time that you're trying to do something on that project, and that first line that you draw, you're so scared to commit to that line, but you only to realize that it doesn't mean anything. It is only going to change and only going to help me think, and it's only going to clarify my thinking more. I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. It does.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Is there anyone else? Yeah.
Yes. Hello, ma'am. This is Srishti.
Hi, Srishti.
Ma'am, my question was, what is the first thought or the research point that we should think of while starting the full design of project?
So there is nothing, nobody would tell you here, this is it, and always think of this. Even in, I don't know if you noticed, but even in the examples that I pointed out, each one had a unique approach to it because each project demanded for something. So first step, I think, is to listen to what the project is demanding from you. Like the library demanded it for it to be a space which was meant for kids. It should invite kids. Whereas that first project I spoke about, that demanded for people to allow that footfall, allow for people to kind of accept ground plane and allow for people to come in. And how do you increase that revenue by increasing the amount of frontage that you have, you know? So each project has a different demand, and I would say listen to that demand, think about that, and then decide how your approach is going to be to address that particular issue on that particular project.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, anyone else? Agam? Are you there today? Agam Kaudia?
Miss Shilpa, miss?
Yes, Melissa.
I have another question.
Yes, please go ahead.
I saw that during that meditation center, Miss had a lot of vernacular styles that were actually inspired from the local people there, like the local material. So, how was your experience while exploring that?
Absolutely beautiful. I think I hope that must have come across my presentation also, but absolutely beautiful. It was one of the most unique projects we've done. And like I said, it was never a site visit. It was always like attending a workshop because we were always kind of discover something new, discover some new technique, some new material. And it was absolutely amazing to explore all of that and understand and modify it and see how that can be adapted to use in our own project. Of course, not just a copy paste, but see what more can we do so that we can use it. Like fly ash blocks were being made always, but nobody was kind of trying to do it like a fly ash wall. So I'm just giving you an example that it's not just a mere copy paste, but about understanding that technique and then moving forward with that technique, evolving that technique further. So yeah, it was absolutely beautiful using those local vernacular materials. And there's one more thing about that project that I forgot to mention. It was built by the community that lived over there. So that was another reason why we were so particular about using those local materials, is because that is something that they were used to living. And by enriching and teaching them any new skill, we were uplifting their kind of workmanship also and their knowledge base also. So that was very critical because here there was no external contractor who had come from a city to go build this really fancy house over there. No, it was all being built by the villagers out there by themselves.
Okay.
Ma'am, can I say something? This is
yeah.
Agam.
Yes, Agam.
Yeah. Um, Ma'am, actually, when you said that means buildings design or beauty not only comes from the holes or if there's some means beautification, ornamentation to it, but it also comes from the material that is being used. I really like that too. It accentuates the local material when you implement in our design. Means nowadays we can see only concrete being used to its extent, and then as ma'am also said earlier that means there's nothing else you can see other than concrete. So I really liked the way in the last one where those kids were playing on those slides, and it really gets complete in that whole thing. So yeah, I really like that thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to say anything? Yes,
Ma'am,
Aryan.
I would like to ask you a question that how do you try to inhabit with the surrounding around, like the tree side building factories, like the compatibility with your structure, with the surroundings? So how you try to inhabit those? Like how you place the trees in between the yoga center,
Hmm.
like how they were placed. Yeah, did you cut it off also?
Yeah. So I didn't get question. So did we talk about that? I think what you saw in the presentation were initially a lot of kind of doodles, and what you're seeing is a very, very small part of a much larger process. Lot of back and forth on kind of plotting the trees on the branches, trying to fit your kind of structure within that. And did you mention cutting? No, not a little tree was cut. You might have pruned one or two branches here or there, which are kind of growing in a different direction, but never cutting a tree at all.
Okay, I like the part where you kept the trees as it is. That's why I asked the question of cutting the trees.
Yeah.
It goes well with the surrounding of the yoga, feeling of the yoga and all. That's why.
Okay, anyone else? Okay,
Ma'am,
yeah. Please go
hi,
on.
this is
Ma'am, this is
Janvi is trying to ask a question.
yeah. Am I not
Yes,
being heard?
Janvi. You are being heard. Please go on.
Yeah,
Vami, I
so
hope you have the time.
Yeah, that's fine, Shilpa.
Yeah.
yeah, ma'am. Good morning. First of all, thank you so much for such a good lecture. It was really helpful. Thank you. And yeah, we had a guest lecture in first sem of architect Shraddha Givit. So, ma'am told us about unlearning. So, I would really like to know that what have you unlearned to get where you are? Because I mean, it's as important as learning new things.
I've unlearned a couple of things that I also mentioned in the presentation that, honestly, architecture is not about, one fine morning I come up with this brilliant idea and this one dream. I sketch this building in my dream and that's it, the project. That is definitely not the idea of who an architect is and what our role in the society is. That is something that I've definitely unlearned. If you are into this profession with that thought, then that was something at least I unlearned, that it is a process and the process is as beautiful as the final outcome. And like they say that there is no fun in doing something that you already know. So the fun is that discovery, it's in that journey. So that is something that I have definitely unlearned or learned rather. And I think another point, like you mentioned in the presentation, is all the certain lightness in being adaptive, feeling of life and being adaptive, allowing for that change to happen, not being so rigid in your approach to the project that it doesn't fit within the context at all. So as you move along, as you go through the journey, you allow for that discovery to happen, for that chance encounter to happen. So I think the two things that I would say my biggest unlearnings or learnings, however you want to put it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, was there someone else who was trying to speak?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Isha.
Ma'am,
Yes,
good
Isha.
morning, ma'am. This is Isha. I have a question, but before that, I really like what you said. The local is the new regional. And my question is, for the last project you shown, you design the structure of including the organic shape, and you find difficulties in constructing it. So it ever happened to you that you have to modify your design for such difficulties?
Always, yeah. Like I said, it's always back and forth, and I mean, sometimes it's not just because it's difficult to construct. If it's difficult, we can simplify it. But sometimes I think it is more about weighing your pros and cons, and it's about weighing your gains and losses. It's more like that. I think if it was difficult, we would have taken up that challenge, which is exactly what we did over here. We took up the challenge, simplified it, something that a local contractor can associate with, and then execute it. But we would change something if we think it is not contributing to the project enough, it is not enriching the project in a certain way. Then yes, of course, change it, but not something because it's difficult. Because if it's difficult, yes, please take up the challenge and resolve it and make it simpler. There is nothing really difficult. But make sure that what you're doing, what you're fighting for, what you're trying to resolve is enriching the project in a way that you want it to.
Yes, ma'am. Difficult time and there were some obstacles. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Okay. Fine. Then, Vami, I'm going to ask one very, very basic question, because these kids are just about to embark on, their first kind of a real world project, so to speak. And a very, very basic question about how important would you say, we did see that little model that you made, which you said had that Lego sort of formation. How important would you tell the students that sketching by hand or making physical models would be for your entire process of, thinking of how this entire thing is going to look, or, to take decisions or anything else that is involved?
Extremely critical, Shilpa. I think you've struck the right note. It is extremely critical. I mean, if anybody is ever kind of stopped by our studio also, they will know that we are constantly making models, constantly. And everybody, it's not like only the intern is making a model. Everybody, including me and Sameep and all our architects and interns and everybody, always working with physical models, with sketches, with doodles. Of course, now in the remote world, it is probably doodles on your kind of iPad or screen. But either ways, it is always the first intuition is something that comes with the hand and with that kind of tactile nature that you can express yourself best by using your own hands, So, and when I say physical models, it's everything, right? From clay to styrofoam to brick to mold to casting to burning to cutting, and everything possible that you can think of, we would have made a model with. And of course, don't be afraid to also eventually kind of use your tools that are available with all your CNC routing, your 3D printing, your laser cutting. It just allow you to express yourself better. Of course, I mean, it's too early on right now, not yet, but eventually over the next couple of years, you will realize how all of that will help you kind of express yourself better. So yeah, Shilpa, I think extremely important.
Thank you so much, Vami. A lot of what you said validates the process also that, we've been going through with the students, and reinforces the fact that whatever, you're learning, even in your first year, whether it's sketching, whether it's model making, the idea of going back and forth, the idea of paying, attention to what your user wants, what your site wants, what your project wants, is something that stays with you right from semester 1 to all your life as an architect. So thank you very much, Vami. It was lovely having you here. It was a very, very nice, and I mean, it must have been not a little effort for you to come down to the level of the first year students, but you did it wonderfully well, as you did it last year again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you again.
Yes, thank you so much, Shilpa, and all the best, kids. And I hope you all have a great semester. I'm sure you all will have. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so we're back. And that was a great lecture. There must have been a lot of terms, students, that you did not understand perhaps right now, but I hope you've noted it down. because at some point of time in the process, we will come to, using this terminology at some point of time. We will come to a lot of it later when we do our site study, when we do our conceptual designs and so on and so forth. So if there is not a lot that you understand from this, that's very good, because you realize that there is much for you to learn. Okay. So do you all want to take a quick 15-minute break? You all can get your thoughts together, because you all have to submit that little written note on the lecture today. And we'll come back in 15 minutes so that we can start with our case study presentations by the groups. Is that all right, Vivek, sir?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay, so y'all can take that 15-minute break and then return. We'll go group number wise. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone.